And welcome back. The primary election season is over earlier than usual, and now we move on to the general election campaign, and it's going to be an interesting one, I'm sure of that. Joining me today to talk a little bit about what we're going to face in the general election, the chairman of the three major political parties in Minnesota, Brian Melendez from the DFL party, Jack Uldrich from the Independence Party, and Tony Sutton from the GOP. Thank you all for being here. Brian, this was an interesting primary night, more interesting for your party than the other parties because you had, I think, the most seriously contested race. But what we now have is, I think, perhaps the starkest contrast Minnesota voters have ever had to choose from. Tom Emmer, pretty far to the right. Mark Dayton, considered pretty far to the left. And Tom Horner, somewhere in between. A lot of people consider Minnesota to have a liberal tradition. Does that give Mark Dayton the edge?
Oh, absolutely. I think so. And I don't think Mark Dayton is that far to the left. Mark Dayton is a progressive Democrat, but he's got a lot of solid ideas that are going to appeal to working-class Minnesotans. More to the point, he's actually laid out his plans for fixing the problems the next governor is going to face. He's got a jobs plan. He's got a budget plan. They're available on his website. If you look at them, they make sense. I think that will appeal to a lot of Minnesotans.
And, Jack, Tom Horner is trying to be as competitive in this race as he can. He has not raised nearly as much money as he says he's going to need. He doesn't have the name recognition that Mark Dayton has. What does he have to do to be competitive?
Well, first, I think that this race is lined up perfectly. I mean, as you categorized, I mean, Tom Emmer is on the far right, Dayton is on the far left. There's a huge opening for Tom Horner. He does have to raise a little bit more money, but I think what he really needs to do is he needs to go beyond being perceived as just a moderate and a centrist and really be seen as a reformer, someone who's going to really bring innovation to state government, because that's what Minnesota needs right now, and that's the opportunity for Tom Horner.
And Tony Sutton, your candidate, Tom Emmer, despite the fact not having a seriously contested primary, he stumbled a few times in a race that he really didn't have much competition in, and that kind of hurt him moving into the general election to the point where he had to reorganize his campaign a little bit. How was he positioned as we start this longer than usual general election campaign?
Well, I think he's really well positioned heading into the general election. The fact of the matter is that both Horner and Dayton are two left-of-center candidates. They're both talking about the same thing, growing the size of government, increasing taxes. There's only one candidate, Tom Emmer, who's really talking about redesigning state government, make Minnesota a better place to do business, to create jobs. The status quo is what Horner and Dayton are talking about, increasing taxes, increasing spending. Reform is coming from Tom Emmer, making government smaller and allowing businesses to grow and putting people back to work.
But Tom Emmer has not given us much detail on how he plans to bridge this budget deficit of nearly $6 billion.
He will be in the days ahead, and quite frankly, that what we don't need to do is we don't need to raise taxes on business job creators in this state like Dayton and Horner are talking about.
Well, actually, Dayton is not proposing that. He's proposing that we raise taxes on wealthy individuals.
And what is the definition of a wealthy person? A household that makes $150,000 is not wealthy. Those are people who have mortgages and car payments, and those are people who don't consider themselves wealthy. The fact of the matter is these guys are talking about threading the needle using the same old raise taxes, increase spending. That doesn't work. We need a different way.
There are two significant tax hikes in Dayton's plan. They occur at $500,000 and $1 million of individual income. Now, there is a slight incremental increase for at $130,000, but that's not where the real revenue comes in. But Dayton is not proposing that we tax businesses. He understands that this election is about jobs and jobs and jobs.
And, Jack, you hear this back and forth a lot between Democrats and Republicans. You probably feel like one of the candidates. Is that where you hope to find some middle ground? And is Tom Horner truly middle ground, or is he, as Tony says, more to the left of
Tom really is middle ground, and this is exactly what we're hoping for in the general election, is that the Republicans and their special interest groups are going to come at Dayton and the special interest groups on the Democratic side are going to go after Emmer, and Horner is really going to rise above it. But Tom really does split the difference. He says, look, this is a $6 billion problem. And one of the reasons why Emmer isn't getting specific is because he knows if he does that, he's going to start cutting into the bone of state government. That's why he doesn't get specific. Tom is getting specific, and he also recognizes the need to do a little bit from the revenue side and some from the spending side, but really it's the reform.
Listen to these guys. They're both talking about raising taxes during a recession. And when you talk about raising taxes on individuals, you're raising taxes on businesses. A lot of people have subchapter S LLCs. It flows right into their personal income taxes. A lot of mom and pop Main Street businesses. Quite frankly, that's irresponsible. It's already having a chilling effect on investment in Minnesota, and we can't have that. But we need a new Minnesota miracle for the 21st century, and that would be if 3M were to actually open a plant in Minnesota. We have to have the gold standard that to make Minnesota a place where even if a company like 3M will once again expand in Minnesota.
Brian,
But Tony, the only reason that you and your candidate can pretend that you're not raising taxes is because you won't give us any details. The fact is we do have to close a $6 billion budget deficit, and the fact of the matter is that the new governor is going to have to come up with a budget that does that 5 months after taking office. So really, tell us, give us the detail. Where are you going to cut $6 billion 5 months into the governor's term? You can't do it. It's all fantasy. Mark Dayton has a real plan. You can see the numbers. You can see where he stands. Tom Emmer either has no plan or has a secret plan. But which is it?
We're running short on time. Let's talk a little about negative advertising. Mark Dayton this week called for all three parties to speak out against third-party negative advertising. And he pointed, of course, to the GOP ad that is running about his record in the U.S. Senate. But during that same news conference, he said something rather curious. We want to play that for you now and then get your reaction to it. Here's what Mark Dayton said a couple of days ago.
Whatever those of us have said or done or not said or not done on the public record as public officials or in our capacity working in the public arena is certainly appropriate for anybody to question and criticize. I think
he's essentially saying anything you've done in the public arena should be fair game. Brian, that ad that the GOP is running is all about his Senate record. Why is that not fair game?
Well, it's not actually about his Senate record. It's about his character. The title of the ad the Republicans put out is an insult. It's a pejorative term. It's called erratic. And, of course, that's what I would expect from the Republicans because they're resorting to personal attacks in the absence of any real ideas. This campaign should be about issues. It should be about issues, and all you're doing is taking pot shots at him because you won't talk about your candidate's plan for the budget or for jobs.
Absolutely factual.
How is your candidate going to close the budget gap?
Your own left-wing organization.
I'm not saying it's not factual, but how is your candidate going to close the budget gap? Talk about the future, not about the past.
You know what? We don't have a budget problem in this state. We have an economic problem. We don't have enough jobs.
We don't have a budget problem? We've got
we don't have enough jobs.
How is that
the reason we're not collecting
problem?
revenue is because we don't have enough jobs.
You heard it right from Tony Sutton, the Republican chair. We don't have a budget problem in this state.
No, we have an economic problem.
If I could just
we don't have enough jobs.
I can tell Jack's been through this before.
Right. And here's why Dayton's call isn't going to go anywhere, because he can't control what the special interests on the right or the left do. They're going to be bickering the entire election. That if Dayton is really serious about this, he needs to stand up to the Democratic special interest groups and say, stop it. I mean, he's going to have to unilaterally disarm. Anything else is disingenuous.
All right, we are out of time. We have 3 months to go. We'd love to have you guys back again and discuss these issues. Brian, Jack, and Tony, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Face Off is next. We'll be back.